Mr. Speaker, we're here tonight on the 41st anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and put simply, as my colleague from Tennessee said, the science is just wrong. Roe v. Wade, the decision, they just got it wrong. You know, I entered pre-medical study in 1973, the year that Roe v. Wade was issued by the court. And I remember taking genetics courses as a pre-med. Remember learning about genetics, learning about human genetics. And then in 1975, when I went to medical school, I actually did a research project with one of the scientists who was mapping the human genome. And I always remember one of the things we did, which was kind of neat, is we actually took one of our cells and stained the DNA. And I still have the picture at home of my DNA. And I remember the scientist telling me, you know, you look at that DNA, and that's human DNA. It's not any other DNA. It cannot be mistaken for any other DNA. In fact, now, Mr. Speaker, as you know, we can now map a person's entire DNA. And any scientist looking at that map of any human being's DNA will tell you that's a human being. It's not a cat, it's a dog, it's not a monkey, it's not another primate. It's a human being. It's the only thing that that DNA could belong to. Well, that's very interesting. Because, of course, if you go back to the Roe v. Wade case and you read about Norma McCorvey, who was Jane Roe, that, of course, was a pseudonym. Her name was Norma McCorvey. She was pregnant at the time with her third child. Two of them had been adopted previously. It was a difficult pregnancy. It was a problem pregnancy. It was an unplanned pregnancy. Well, Norma ran into two lawyers who wanted to overturn, two ambitious lawyers who later she would go on to say she was, quote, the pawn of two young and ambitious lawyers who just wanted to test the case, the Texas law. They wanted to bring it to the Supreme Court, who told her that her fetus was just, and I quote, a blob of tissue. Mr. Speaker, we know much better than that. Science knows much better than that. It was not a blob of tissue. It was a human being. It had the same chromosomes, the same DNA, the same genetics as you and I. Any scientist in the world could tell that that's a human being. In fact, from the moment of conception, the scientific truth is we're dealing with human beings. In the case of Roe v. Wade, 56 million human beings whose lives were ended as a result of that decision. Now we're going to celebrate, and I mean celebrate with a pro-life rally, life next week. And in the end, we're going to win this struggle. Because in the end, what the justices determined were legal beings are going to be really determined to be human beings worthy of protection. And I will tell you why there are going to be so many of the nation's youth at that rally. Because our nation's youth grew up knowing that Roe v. Wade is in fact the law of the land. And in fact, the law says legally their existence may have been threatened. And Mr. Speaker, I've told this story before. If anybody doesn't believe it, I want them to meet Jennifer. My wife volunteers at a pregnancy center. One of those places where women with troubled pregnancies, they're in a bad situation. They know that in this country it's legal to have an abortion, but what they really want is help. And my wife is fluent in Spanish. She was raised in Puerto Rico. She's the only person at that pregnancy center in Maryland who speaks Spanish. She wasn't supposed to be there that day when Maria, on political asylum from Guatemala, called because it was Maria's third baby, just like Norma McCorvey's third baby. And she was having a hard time because her husband had left her. It was going to be a hard time to raise that child. And she called the clinic because, honestly, she was looking for an abortion referral. It just happened that Maria doesn't speak English. She speaks a few words, not fluently enough to be understood. Just happened my wife was there. My wife talks to her, and she helps her. And the pregnancy center helps her. And Maria, who really didn't want an abortion, but knew it was legal, and it was an option, gave birth to Jennifer. Jennifer's now in middle school. She's a great kid. I would challenge anyone to look into Jennifer's eyes and say that Roe v. Wade got it right. Mr. Speaker, next week, thousands and tens of thousands of young people are going to be on the Mall to join with us to say, simply put, Roe v. Wade got it wrong. I yield back the time.